And I hope you've had more than just kind thoughts from people like me, but actually active support from the rest of the sector as you deal with this. So that's significant. What I would like to say in terms of the meeting is thank you to your staff, Nadine, Pauline, Steve. We had a sort of an emergency call. Everything's done an emergency around here, isn't it, Riet? Which was actually, what do we really do today? Because the risk committee, these are matters of risk which we should deal with. And Steve, in particular, I'm grateful that you sponsored the way in which we have changed the day's proceedings, including our work with PwC. And I'd just also like to acknowledge that we've got Stu here in the room, and I've invited Stu for the whole day. When you get into the agenda, you'll realise that our external audit will be critical for us, both for the 2022-23 year, the current year that we're in auditing, but also as we go forward into recovery, having the support and understanding and, quite frankly, sign off of our external auditors, Joey, will be important. So thank you for being here, being able to be here, and I'd invite you to be a full part of the day with the rest of the team as well, which is great. Hey, I'm sure, Josh, I should have been better and asked you, would you care to lead us in the Karakia, please?
Amorene te whānau, me Karakia tātou. A he honore e kororia ki te atua he maungarongo ki te whenua e whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Hei mua koe i a mātou e ihua, hei tohu i a mātou e mahi katoa. Ko koe anō hei whakakahi a mātou kia whaikarori a mātou i roto mahi katoa. He mea tīmata, he mea mahi, he mea whakaroti i roto i a koe. Kia whiwhi ai mātou i te oranga tōtangi a te whai tianei mātou i tēnei rā. Kororia ki tō ingoa tapu. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Josh. So again, in terms of approach, obviously we have the open session. We have an important PX session. I think we've got it right, Nadine. We're keen that if any other councillors wish to come to that, that's actually an important part where we're dealing with some of the more direct and yet, I guess, early briefings for the risk committee around the cyclone. And then this afternoon we have PwC. They too had to revise their approach, recognising emergency, recognising recovery, and our need to relook at actually what is our risk profile. So that's the nature of the day. But firstly, apologies. I haven't been informed of any apologies. I think we have a full muster, do we? No, you don't. You're right, we are. Thank you. You're quite right. I should have recognised that. We don't know where Tony is, Heather. Yeah, might just be running late. Okay, well, look, let's accept a late apology, or let's propose to accept a late apology from Tony. I think we have a Councillor Parata on the video somewhere, is the other advice that I've had. So if you are there, Councillor Parata, welcome to the meeting. It's great to have you here. Can I move from the chair that we accept an apology from Tony for lateness? Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Riet. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Thank you. Are there any matters on the agenda for which members need to reflect on their interests? There being none, I'll move on to the minutes from 23 November last year. Before, what is it, sort of like it's BC, isn't it, rather than AD, Riet? I think it might be, I don't know, before Christmas, that's right. Look, I'll move from the chair that we accept these are true and correct record. Is there any matters or amendment people would like to make or suggest for these? Thank you, appreciate that. In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. We don't have any leaves of absences as I'm aware of. Perhaps I should have made, and I do reflect on this, Josh, apologies we didn't give the Karakia first, but in some ways perhaps I've tried to reflect on the feeling from around the sector in support of Gisborne. But are there any matters or acknowledgement of triggers we should be aware of at this stage? Being none, I'll carry on. I haven't been informed of any public input or petitions. The business has been pretty much set the way we have it, so I don't think there's any extraordinary business or notices of motion. Sunday, certainly, or any adjourned business that we're carrying over. So that's tremendous. That gets us straight into item 10. And I suspect Pauline and Stu, you guys will speak to this, please.
I'll just introduce, as you say, as you've seen before, Stuart is the partner for our EY for our annual report and our assurance processes. And he's just going to go through what the plan is for this year and the matter of emphasis. I just also want to say that what we also will be doing in our internal processes is we have external funds for our disaster relief trust or anything that comes from public money. The scrutiny that we apply first and foremost is additional degrees of delegations and oversight within that process. So we have that ourselves, so as a matter of emphasis, and other things that we will be looking through for our processes at year end are any assets that have been impaired that we have to recognise, be it in our roads or anything else as part of this process. But I'll pass over to Stuart.
Thank you,
So
Pauline.
can I just check? Sorry, Pauline.
Probably covering the audit plan as compared to the item 10.
Yeah, I think we need to deal with your proposal first.
Yeah.
Really quickly, because it's a non-paper in effect. So let's just.
I'll reflect on where we're at to the committee in relation to that.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I don't really. It's talking about fees is a bit mercenary first thing up in the morning.
Go for it, Stu. Come on.
In terms of our audit proposal process, so we are appointed by the Auditor General. We're in a process where we prepared our proposal for the next 3 years. We provided that to the Office of the Auditor General. The standard practices that we then get feedback and recommendations around any adjustments from the Auditor General. That's been with them for a few weeks, and so we're just waiting for that to come back. So it didn't make the papers. When we do receive it back, we'll want to sit down with Pauline's team and just sort of discuss that and make sure that management are comfortable with that before sort of putting it to the committee. Just in terms of reflection, last year, it took us a little bit longer than we had budgeted to do the audit for a number of little reasons. First of all, the kind of operational tempo of council has increased, and probably the scale of central government funding into the district over the course of the last 2 to 3 years has been higher than we had expected. There were some challenges around water quality standards, which we eventually got over the top of. But with the changes in that part of the sector, that's presented some challenges. And consolidation and infrastructure indexing matters. Those were the sort of things that drove a little bit more time last year, and the old bugbear of a few audit inefficiencies, which we need to sort of keep working on. We're not going to pass all those on as part of any uplift in this year, but we do need to take into consideration the sort of changing tempo of the council. Obviously, today we're going to be talking a lot of the time about the impact of the cyclone on things such as insurance, on damage to your infrastructure. Some of those matters are too hard to actually fathom at the present point in time, and so we'll just have to work with Pauline and the team as we work through that. So the proposal's well in train, but it's not with you at the present time. When we get it back from the OAG, we'll pass it to Pauline and the team, and then work with the committee as you see fit.
Thanks for that, Stu. So members should be welcome to raise any questions you had at this stage. I think really what I'd like to reflect here is it's a progress report in effect now, and I will want to make a suggested alteration to the recommendation. Here and Nadine as Chief Executive be delegated the task of the committee to clear both the fee proposal, and actually there's a second letter that comes with this, the engagement letter for the 3 years, as soon as it's available and Pauline's had a chance to comment. But is there any questions you'd like to raise with Stuart at this stage? Possibly that's more relevant when we get to the annual plan. So look, can I suggest, and I'm sorry that it was really it's last minute, because we were hoping to actually be able to table both those letters. Could I suggest that the committee consider my resolution that the audit and risk now I hope I say this right, I need some correction. The Arai Turaru, sorry, Me Te Tatari. It sounds a great name. Delegates to the chair and of the committee and the chief executive the task of clearing the engagement letter and audit fee proposal from Ernst Young. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. So, any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right. Sorry, Pauline. Correctional letter. Let's deal with the audit plan. And if you've got nothing else to say, Stewie, go for it.
Oh, my apologies. I should have been aware of what the order of the play.
Yeah. Hey. It probably would be normally me that would make the mistake, Pauline. So I never mind. Stu, is there anything you'd like to say to your paper, please?
Oh, look, so the plan sets out our intended areas of focus for the year. The format's relatively similar to previous years. It was written after the cyclone had gone through, but obviously before full knowledge of the impact of that has been assessed. And so we have put a major piece in there around emergency works and funding. But it's kind of a little bit, how long is the piece of string? The key from our perspective is that we will keep in touch with council progressively through the year and just work through issues as they come up. And that might be in relation to impairments of your assets. It might be in regards to insurance claims, all sorts of different things, central government funding, changes in legislation around timelines, not just for annual reporting, but for annual plan process and the LTP process. All those sort of things are, as you know, in the air. And so it's my task to basically stay connected with Pauline and the team, or Nadine and the team, and also with the Office of the Auditor General and anything that's coming out of the DIA in relation to this sort of space. So we just want to make sure that whilst you've gone into emergency operations, that you're still spending money under delegated authorities, that due processes have been maintained as far as possible, and that where there's major judgments and assumptions being made in terms of the preparation of key financial reporting, that they are appropriately applied. That the impact of all that will flow through our work on infrastructure assets in terms of valuation, in terms of any impairments. It'll also flow into lots of other areas such as service performance reporting. Earlier on I mentioned the fact that last year there was a lot of work done around the water quality standards. Obviously there's been significant challenges in that space over the course of the last month or so. And so those are the sort of things that we'll just have to work through in terms of disclosures by the council, any relief there might be in regards to reporting in that space, and quite how we sort of capture that. So it's really about understanding how it's all playing out. And I'll really appreciate sort of being in on the risk committee, or risk session this afternoon to sort of hear straight up, some of the things that are going to be spoken about. In terms of other areas, the audit of GHL will be covered separately directly with GHL, but obviously the consolidation is important. I know there's ongoing discussions with GHL in terms of their strategic planning forward, but we'll need to engage with GHL and try and make that group sort of consolidation process as seamless as possible from our perspective, because that can always be a little bit niggly and has potential to be a bit niggly. And then last of all, we've had Lauren Hunt as the audit manager on the engagement for a few years. Well, she's been involved with the council for a few years. She's decided to move over to our Sydney office to sort of broaden her horizons for a little bit of period of time. And so I'm bringing a new staff member, Kayleen, onto the engagement as a senior manager. She has previously had experience with council a few years ago as an audit senior, so she knows you, and so I'll work with her. Lauren's still with us at the present time. The interim audit will be managed by both Lauren and Kayleen, and then we'll just sort of transition Lauren as she jumps on a plane to Sydney. Happy to take any questions from any members of the committee in regards to the paper or anything else.
Yeah, thank
you'd
you.
like to-
Thank you, Stu, for that. That's indeed what we'll do. I just wanted to go back to the original paper from Pauline and team, which said council can raise matters of concerns with the auditors. Stuart, we haven't actually identified the, I should have thought about it. We didn't identify the need to actually meet with you without staff present. We didn't actually discuss that this morning. Do you have a need to talk to us without staff present?
Look, not at this stage. I mean, we obviously had a good session at the end of last year's audit, and I'm usually pretty willing to be free and frank. I have no concerns that I would want to raise with or without staff present. So thank you for the opportunity. And if I need to do that, then I'll signal that through you, Chair.
Thank you. I think for the sake of the course of the meeting, unless there was a feeling from the committee, we should have time with Stuart alone. We've got the open communication. Riet, you've got a question.
Stuart, I have a question on page. It's about integrity of rates, strike rates, invoicing, and it's the background. But I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more. The second to last bullet point: recent legal challenges against certain local authorities have identified a range of issues relating to the legislative compliance and therefore legality of rates sought. That just caught my eye, and I thought if you could maybe just share a little bit more in that regard, that would be great.
Oh, look, I mean, things bubble up across the sector in terms of different interpretations or challenges to sub-elements of rate strikes. Obviously, you've got your own court case going on here, or legal situation in regards to a group of growers in the district. You've charged those rates, you've recovered those rates over the years, and that's just sort of something that will be resolved in the course of things. I mean, look, there's no particular situation at a certain district council that I need to call out and sort of say, oh, well, I think that actually applies to Gisborne.
Okay.
It's just that there's always, every year, there's one or two sort of rates, questions, challenges across the sector. And it's like usually, how does that situation play out at Gisborne District Council or Hastings?
We still haven't got the accommodation provider targeted rate in Auckland across the line, Riet. So there are those sorts of things which I assume that you're referring to. Thank you. Are there any? Yes, Colin.
Yes, although I've Googled them, I'd like to hear an explanation for planned materiality of tolerable misstatement and the I'm sitting with figures.
Right. All right. So I mean, you page 2 of the document. Oh, right. Yeah. So I mean, materiality is a number that you come up with that sort of reflect if the financial statements were out by a certain number, what is your average stakeholder going to sort of think is material to how they read and interpret the financial statements. We drive it off expenditure in a local authority sense because ultimately council will rate to meet your expenditure needs. So expenditure is the normal driver. Within a local authority sense, you would never, you then have ranges of what you might think is an appropriate level of expenditure that might be a driver for that materiality. And for some expenditure, you'd sort of say it was on a range between 1% and 3%. 3% is if you're in a very low risk environment, nothing really happening here. 1% is probably at the top end of risk. And you use different drivers depending on what sector in. If I'm down the road at Port of Napier, auditing Port of Napier, it's going to be 5% of net profit before tax. It's very commercial focused. Here at the council, it's 2% of expenditure because your focus is managing your expenditure because that's what drives rates ultimately. So the number, I mean, that's just based on forecast expenditure. It's middle of the range in terms of our assessed risk profile. So you're not without risk, but you're not at the risky end of the scale. And then in terms of the level that we report audit differences to this committee, essentially it's going to be 5% of the materiality number. And so we accumulate audit differences if we identify them, and it gets to a point of sort of tolerance. We can accept a number of small errors as long as we report those to those charged with governance. If they all tally up to swinging the accounts too much in one direction, we'll say, hey, I'll stop. We need to start making some of these changes. And it's really around, getting them on the table and being able to communicate about differences that we see. Well, we don't have a long history of lots and lots of audit differences here at Gisborne District.
The tolerable misstatement amount of 120K, is that adjustable? Can we as a committee bring that lower?
You could. That would mean I'd have to do more work, because this drives the level of testing and the detail of the testing that we undertake. And so the lower the sort of the reporting threshold, the more detailed the work we have to do, because otherwise we're not going to necessarily pick up everything within that sort of level. I think personally, I've said that because I think that's what is consistent with what we see in the sector and what we think professionally is appropriate for an organisation of this size. If council has a concern in terms of a particular risk, I would probably suggest, rather than changing a number like that, that you understand what other controls or processes are in place around a particular area of risk, rather than just sort of saying, right, well, we've got that degree of risk across everything that the council does. So happy to talk further about that, but there's ways and means.
Okay, yes, Andy.
Pages 20 and 21, they're probably more management questions really. Page 20, you've got cash flow ability to make upfront payments and claim these back from each funding provider and rest. My question really is about the confidence that if we do spend the cash, we do have the ability and confidence that we are going to make full claimbacks. So that one, and then on 21, it's got the useful life assumptions and the valuations that are outdated. Just wondering how outdated they are and how much risk around, how we need to get them aligned. So might be more for it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're a good combination of questions for Pauline and potentially David, but I'm happy to sort of pitch in. Pauline, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I'm not sure particularly a point you made on the 20 where.
Yeah, it's near one of the cash flow ability to make upfront payments.
It's
What's
the
your-
current issue that we face.
Yeah.
So it's a cash flow and our ability. So in terms of, just for your own reference, we're trying to match up as much as possible when we make expenditure from those that will be reimbursing us as close as possible. But some cases they may not happen. We're having discussions with NEMA where they allow some progress payments with it, so we don't have the cash flows. We're having discussions with Wapata exactly the same within that as well. But in addition to that, we have the ability and we're geared up for facilities for up to 35 million. So that allows us, if it's a short term, well, we have to pay it out and we haven't got the money in there, we've got the ability to do that. So that's kind of managing our cash flow arrangements. In terms of the useful lives of things are second, why we have those kind of best practices that they have also from the valuers that underpin our assets. So buildings, they're saying how much of the condition assessments are left for the useful lives. The same thing as with infrastructure. They will be doing the values for that, and the same as with the kind of the road. So it's inherent. We have ours, but then it's inherent that the valuers will be coming in and having a look at to check to see are they reasonable.
Wondering if I could just make a follow-up comment to that. you've focused there on, quite rightly, the emergency works, and Stewie's put that up front as being the big issue. And something like cash flow, my guess, and I've heard you sort of saying in the background here, Nadine, is got to be one of the most critical risks we have at the moment. So let's remember the first order of responsibility for council is both us as governors and Nadine and team as management to monitor and manage this carefully, and to ensure that the subsidy that we can claim off Waka Kotahi, or indeed anybody else, is managed well and done, and that we control our expenditure in the right way. I'm really delighted that Stu has highlighted this as actually this giving us the external view on that management. But it's going to be after the event, largely, in lots of ways, because actually that's a real live issue that we're needing to manage now. And I suspect that'll come out as we get into the greater briefing around Cyclone Gabriel and the response. But it's a really important point, Stu, that you're acknowledging that from an external audit perspective, we will also ultimately have Stuart's view, and that's going to be, I suspect, very important for us and timely. So that's really superb. It actually gets me very closely, Pauline, to a question I want to ask, which is that I'm making some assumption that our control environment around this, we're having to probably reorient, put resource into actually managing things like our cash flows. I'm thinking the last time I was here and we had, forget the previous cyclone, I don't want to be flippant about that, but early on, you know, for instance, internal audit Mel had to get focused on helping us with things like claims and what have you. I presume those are the sorts of things that we have in place now, which gives some assurance that we'll meet the test that Stewie's putting in front of us.
Yeah, I've kind of alluded to that, what was the emphasis and what we're putting to support under some of the things in the annual report, what we will be doing, certainly with the NEMA claim, certainly with the insurance. We've put additional resources in there immediately to oversee that and see the claims and actually go by line to check to see, is it our cost, is it NEMA costs, or is it which is 100% welfare, or actually is it under the 60% claimable? So yes, we've put definitely resources in there, additional over and above, but it is a focus. It's definitely a focus right from day one for us is the cash flow and how it will impact us, so we can mitigate that the coming in matches as much as we can, minimise it, the cash flows that are going out.
It also makes me reflect, Stu, that I'm not going to be, sounds like putting pressure, the timeliness of the audit will be really valuable. So when I pick up your issue, also, Andy, around the useful lives of our assets, it's not just an accounting thing. The balance sheet needs to portray what is the real situation at Gisborne. And let's face it, by the time you give us our opinion, what are we aiming for, October? Be honest, we're only starting the recovery, and so to have I'm about to use the word accurate, but to have a reasonable view of actually our assets as they stand and what is the fair portrayal, albeit in dollar terms, is going to be so helpful to the cause of Gisborne. So your question's really good, and that's again where I need Stewie to help us, and that's why we need the benefit of the external view. It's going to come at a good time. Tony, welcome. We did pass an apology for your assumed lateness, so I'm glad you're able to make it. But
traffic was just diabolical. The motor was bang. I think there was some sort of, I don't know.
Shop, okay. Anyway,
so building on this line of questioning, is it anticipated that we will have a shortfall, and at what point do you think we'll get a good grasp of what that shortfall might be?
Tony, I wonder if we could just delay that to our later discussions, okay. Because I mean, I think we're talking here about what Stuart plans to do in terms of his audit. Yep. If you haven't got that answered by the time we deal with the PX briefing and indeed the workshop this afternoon, you need to be unrelenting in your question, because I think it's fair to ask that. Right, Stuart. Oh, yes, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Stuart, it's actually linked to our infrastructure question and the assumptions. Do you have an external view, or part of this audit also speak to the assumptions that we're given that impact things like useful life of our assets, the long-term development and planning for our roading infrastructure. There's assumptions that we're given things like 1 in 100 year rainfall, all of these kinds of things, and they've massively been impacted in terms of over the last 2 years. We've had several 1 in 50, all that kind of stuff. Do you have an external view from an audit perspective in regards to the impact of those kinds of assumptions on our infrastructure? Will that form any part of the feedback in regards to the audit report?
Thanks, Councillor. Look, from my perspective, what I want to see is council utilising the experiences that you've been having over the last, number of years, but particularly the last sort of 12 to 18 months in regards to how your assets are standing up. Council maintain asset management plans that have detailed understanding of the structure and nature of those assets. So we will expect that council goes through a robust process to keep those asset management plans and those useful life assessments up to date. And there'll be some assets which will be deemed to sort of say, well, actually previously we expected them to last X numbers of years, and actually now our experience in the current environment is they're just not lasting that long. And so that will have an impact potentially on the valuation, because all your values are done on a optimized depreciated replacement cost perspective. So how far through the useful lives are those infrastructure assets is a really important component. And we've only got 3.5 months to balance date, but those are sort of some of the things that as you're working through trying to rebuild assets or determine how you should rebuild certain assets, you should also be looking at some of the asset base that you have and sort of say, right, well, should we not expect actually an asset of that nature to last that long anymore? So as an auditor, I don't have as much understanding of your asset base as your staff do. I want to see that your staff, for any new information that's come to hand, any new understanding of the impact of the changing conditions on your asset base, what that's doing to your useful life, and then that being fed through to your interactions with your external valuers. When ultimately this will come flowing through into your long-term plans, your infrastructure strategy, and the long-term view to how much you have to spend to maintain service levels within your networks. And I suppose we're more looking at your flood protection assets and your roading infrastructure, given what's happening in the sort of 3 water space. But all the asset classes are in play for 30th of June 2023. So it's not a very direct answer, but it's all the things that need to flow into what we're going to assess those values and those depreciation charges should be going forward.
It wouldn't be uncredible, Josh, to anticipate some sectoral adjustments in these accounts. It wouldn't be unreasonable to anticipate some substantial adjustment in these accounts around our asset values. And it could have a significant impact, but we'll have to wait and see. Pauline has to work. I'd like to move on if that's okay. The only thing that I would do as chair is just to note, I did want to check timing in the plan. We essentially are keeping it as 31 October, which is probably the credible date, Pauline, somewhere close to that, to actually have everything lined up so that the council prepared, the audit is done, and in the October meeting of council, we'll be looking to, as a committee, to recommend council. Correct?
And at this stage, it's at early October.
Early October.
Yeah, it's about
Okay.
whatever it is, it's the first or second week in October.
Okay.
We didn't have,
No, that's not no undue issue on that one at the stage, Stu. He says, look.
Oh, look, there was some funnies. I think the audit committee was like 2 weeks before the council adoption because of school holidays, and we were going to work through the timing of that.
Yeah.
Our task is and in conjunction with management, if there's some real big mountains to climb in terms of getting the numbers together, then my advice will be, let's use the rest of October as necessary to get that right. But, you know, we've got the staff lined up to do the job in line with management's current timeline, and how it all flows together in October. We'll just have to keep it up.
Brilliant. Look, that's really great. Thank you. That's Joey and Pauline. I actually quite frankly don't doubt the size of the task between now and whenever we adopt in October. So I think we said at one point, good open communications is really important, and if not more so this year. And Stu, I think from the conversation you can see that we will really value the input of your team and its work, albeit it's sort of like business as usual on top of everything else that we've got to get done. Can I move to the recommendation, which again, to my apologies to the preparer, I think actually the scope of the committee is to actually approve the audit plan, not just to note it. So if we could just note that the committee will approves the audit plan, I think that is the appropriate role that we have here. I'll move that from the chair. Thank you, Josh. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against is carried. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that, Stu. Right, if we could move on then, please, to our next item, which is, get me right, is the strategic risk management. How could I forget that, Steve? In your hands, man.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, yes. The timing of this report, I think, is both appropriate and problematic, given that we are still in the middle of a major civil defence emergency response. I think today is the second day of us having moved into the response phase. Recovery phase, sorry, of the event. So it's still an event that is unfolding, and we are still to fully define and determine the full impact, both to our community and the environment, and also to the council as an organisation. In saying that, however, the purpose of this committee is to address risk. So what better time to look at how we are managing risk, given we are in this situation. So I draw the committee's attention to page 36 of the report, and the strategic risk table under item 4. It identifies our current risk level across the assessed strategic risks. And I'll come on to the risks still to be assessed shortly. But of the risks that have been assessed and are being reported on today, we have one area of risk, asset management, that is at the highest level of risk, serious. And we have 6 other risks that are at the next level of risk as major. And that's a high number of strategic risks to be outside our risk appetite. And there's 2 compelling reasons why the assessments are as they are. Primarily, the financial risks are based on a prudent approach, given the wider economic environment we are operating in. And this has been further compounded by the impact of Cyclone Gabrielle on our organisation's resources. So the financial impact to council is still being worked through and still being determined. And there's a further report to this committee today around the insurance impact. It's fair to say that costs are still being worked through as we understand and fully appreciate the impact on council services, facilities and infrastructure of this major event. The other risks are a direct outcome of the Cyclone Gabrielle event. So with civil defence, there's an element of prudence there that during Cyclone Gabrielle, we did experience a number of events, primarily the loss of communications for an extended period of time, which, while was anticipated, the full impact of that on our ability to function wasn't as fully appreciated perhaps as it played out in practice. And the prudence aspect is around, as we move into recovery, the requirement or the need for staff to continue business as usual operations while still attending to the recovery aspects of the event. So that's placing a stretch on staffing capacities to continue both business as usual operations while putting in recovery actions. The other risk that I do want to refer to is asset management. It was previously serious before Cyclone Gabrielle, primarily because of the impact previous weather events had on our roading network. That has been further compromised, and alongside that we are also dealing with our water infrastructure and repairs to that. So that risk has extended and is taking significant council effort to bring back to our risk appetite, and is fair to say that it is happening alongside central government support to assist that process, particularly around our roading. So we have a number of quite serious risks to the organisation that we are actively managing. That there is good news in this report that I would also like to bring to the committee's attention, which is that one of our earlier risks, our people and capability risk, had previously been at major and is now at moderate. We have our data confirming that we are moving back within our risk appetite in terms of the vacancies and turnover of permanent personnel. So in the report, the statistic is that we're at 16.6%, which is just within our threshold of 17%, and I'm pleased to advise the committee it's fallen further to 15.8%. And further actions, if this committee and council wish to support it, could see those figures improve further. We have a relatively long period of time in which we think we will get this risk back to a more manageable and satisfactory level, or we could put more resources into speeding up that recruitment process. So that is one aspect that management is looking at currently to see what is the best option to look at taking in that regard. That's my summary of the risk report to committee. There are a couple of actions following on from this report. We do have a workshop this afternoon facilitated by PwC, and that's really to work with this committee and councillors around taking this opportunity while we are still working out what the full impact of Cyclone Gabrielle is on the organisation, to look early at how that's going to impact on our mix of strategic risks going forward. It's fair to say we have an annual plan that we need to get in place for this coming year, and we are about to start a long-term plan process. Both actions will be impacted by the consequences of Cyclone Gabrielle. Workshop is an opportunity to see how we fit those into our planning and processes, and also around the financial impact to the organisation and how that may change how we operate in the short term as we come through this recovery phase and try and get back to business as usual.
Thanks, Steve. Members, I just want to, this is a general, I need to keep, I don't want to kill conversation, but there's a sense to which there's a set piece, which I must confess partly is public excluded and is also in a workshop. So I'm conscious we're in public and it's appropriate that we acknowledge the risk settings that we're in. So if I could encourage members to raise questions which are more around what is our overall risk profile. If it's detail around the cyclone, I think it's clear there are other places in our agenda, but I don't want to kill it on the basis it is important that the public receive indeed your very good report, Steve. So if there's questions at that high level, that's fine, Josh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't have any interrogative questions. I do just want to acknowledge the reduction in people and capability. Russ, it's really crucial for us as an organisation. I'm more than happy to have further discussions with the presence of all of the council colleagues this afternoon during our strategic risk deep dive. And on that note, I'm happy to move the paper, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Tony?
To a question, paragraph 53 on page 41 talks about business continuity plans under that area which has been upgraded in the risk rating. And I just wonder why it says that they're only intended to be in place for a short period of time, but then acknowledging that the continued disruption is going to impact upon our ability to deliver business as usual. So the business as usual is one of the gongs I'll be banging today. Can you just give us a bit of an explanation on that sentence, please?
So with the business continuity plans, they tend to be used more in the response phase of a civil defence in the short term. However, we can see through Cyclone Gabrielle, there's an extended call on staffing to address those recovery actions. So that does impact on ongoing business as usual functions. So whether these business continuity plans need to be evolved to cover that kind of contingency is something we're also looking at.
Thank you, Tony. Any other questions, Colin?
Thank you, Bruce. I've got two questions. First one on page 38 under people and capabilities. The turnover of staff has dropped. Can you put your finger on what the council's done to improve that situation? And second question is on page 39, under number 34, there's been an increase in the number of tender evaluators, and you've improved the rigor of the tender process. Is that implying the tender process was lacking a bit in the past? Could you elaborate on that? Thank you.
Kia ora, through the chair, I'm happy to respond to your first question relating to people and capability. You'll have a copy of the Public Excluded Report 22252, which outlines the number of interventions that council put in place in an effort to improve our staff turnover stats, which had reached a sort of all-time high, reaching the 30 percentile turnover. In addition to that, as the report outlines, we have a specific specialist in place who does recruitment full-time, comes with 20 years experience. So those are two of the key strategic things. The other things that we've worked on is our employer value proposition. So why come work for us? What's great about GDC? Culture interventions as well. In addition, there's things that we haven't been able to control but are taking place in the market itself, i.e. the opening up of our borders has had an impact across the nation in terms of the employment market. So things are changing in the national scene as well. We may be returning to the old adage of us being public versus private sector competition, which is what we've been used to, for years. So those would be the key things that I'd highlight.
And through you, Chair, just in response to the second question, it's really a simple case of improving and increasing the capability and expertise around procurement processes. So previously, where we didn't have the in-house expertise, we would outsource and have consultants, contractors run that part of the process for us on a case-by-case basis and to the level needed for the level of procurement being sought. So it's just simply having that in-house expertise. We've been able to grow our capability internally, and that gives us better control over the process, and we have better expertise internally to assess
quotes and proposals.
And I would think with the coming challenge of the recovery, that's good to have that capability growing inside the shop. Dare I say it, more efficient too, which is good. Kenny,
Sorry, I have to.
brilliant. Any other questions at this stage? I was interested, Steve, when I got to paragraph 27, because I guess my eye as a sort of accountant couldn't quite believe that we're only to major in terms of our financial risk. And 27 is obviously the hold all to say we're in an assessment process. And again, we're going to come back to that this afternoon. But my gut instinct is that actually it is higher, and I suspect we'll conclude that in the end. But actually, I like the approach you're doing, because actually you're looking for the indicators and the key markers of that, rather than just saying, oh, we're in a bad situation or a good situation. You're looking carefully at it, so I appreciate that. So we have a motion from Josh and Ariette that we note the report. Is there any further discussion either on the motion or indeed the report? Being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you, Steve. An odd day in a sense. I'd love to have had more time, but we'll have more time with some key areas going forward. Can we move to the insurance renewal update, please? Sorry, it's gone. Pauline, are you leading this off, please?
I think most of it is read, but we have Deanna McDonald that's zooming in from, and she is from Aon, but she's a national client relationship manager for the local government of risk practice. And so she's just going to give you a little bit of a background, what's in the markets with regards to insurance, what are we facing, especially if we take the increasing events, and to give you sort of an oversight of the insurance itself. And then later on, we have to take any questions if we need to ask with Deanna, but also then on the paper. But I'll pass it over to Deanna.
Hi, Dee. It's good to have you, to see you again this week. Dee,
Hi,
where are your
Bruce.
hands?
Thank you. Just bear with me and I'll share my screen so we can get into going through the presentation. It's getting a habit again, isn't it, Bruce? It's that time of year.
No, I needed to have it.
All right, so we will just go through and mainly talk about the markets today. Pauline has asked just to give you an update on that, and then if you have any questions, we can answer those after. We're going to be looking at the markets in two different ways. Firstly, those before the 27th of January, meaning the Auckland, Northland and Coromandel floods, and then obviously Cyclone Gabrielle following that. Throughout the APAC region, we've taken a snapshot from our Global Markets Insight report from Q3 2022. Now, looking at that, it's actually started to get a bit more green, which means the market has been getting better. A year previous to this, if we'd looked at the same snapshot, it would have been a lot more red and orange. So to have green in there, it is quite nice to see. However, the insurer focus has still been on portfolio growth and retention, with underwriters still remaining fairly selective on the risks, and scrutiny on valuations is still continuing. Last renewals, so 1 November, we saw a deceleration of the rate increases that we had been seeing for the previous years, but they were anticipating that the 1 January reinsurance treaties were going to be fairly difficult. Now, I'll discuss those a bit later on. Insurers have been fairly happy to invest, and there's been an offset of that, however, due to the inflationary costs, and the costs are increasing with the likes of labour shortages and supply chain issues, as well as impacting the time it takes for repairs and the cost of claims. So we see the likes of construction costs have gone up 28%, building materials between 12 to 18%, and overall building costs have gone up 15% over the past year. And with inflation in New Zealand up on a 32-year high, costs of recovering from events are increasing, unfortunately, and which is impacting the insurer profits. Now, these issues are also impacting the valuations that are applied to your assets and the efficacy of loss modelling. Now, previously, you were talking about the values that are applied to these assets that are optimised depreciated costs. That's for your accounting side of things. For the insurance side, we're looking at the replacement value. And those need to have a separate valuation, which takes into effect how much the cost of the overall claim is going to be, replacing it for like for like. Looking at this, this is a global map of the top 10 events that happened throughout the world last year in 2022. And previously, the insurers have been focusing more on, obviously, earthquake because of the higher impact on their bottom line and the greater impact to the communities. Because of the amount of natural catastrophes, weather events that have been taking place and the higher frequency of these, it's become quite a topic of conversation amongst the insurers. And it's the higher frequency and greater severity of these, and it's those events that are causing the attritional losses at the bottom end of your insurance program. And that's what can kill insurance programs. So this is where we need to take a strategic look of where your insurance does actually kick in and what is nice to have cover, so, and what is necessary and what isn't so much necessary to take away those burdens on your pricing and capacity market. So whether or not you believe in climate change, unfortunately yourselves, you've been afflicted by a number of events recently, and they are happening more frequently. And they are having higher annual totals. Now, moving on, we can see here, it's the top losses around the world. And as I say, these are becoming more so the weather events than the earthquake. So global insured losses in 2022 were about 140 billion US dollars. 125 billion of those were covered by private insurers. New Zealand is one of the highest insured countries in the world. And in 2022, it became the 5th year in a row where losses were above the $100 billion threshold globally. So it's estimated 61% of global losses were not covered by insurance. Hurricane Ian, at the back end of last year, was a 34% economic loss and 39% of the global annual total of insured loss. So some big numbers there. And this is the Oceania region, just to give you an idea of what is happening there. And once again, it's more focused on those weather events. We did have the volcano and the earthquake in the other countries in the region, but it still takes into that global market effect. So Cyclone Dovie back in February 2022 was an $84 million economic loss for the Pacific region. Now, earlier I mentioned about the reinsurance market. We work in a global market. As much as we have local markets here that we have on your program, they are owned offshore. And on 1 January, the offshore markets reinsure and the reinsurers reinsure. At the end of last year, they were anticipating those reinsurance treaties to be quite challenging because of the number of events that have been going on. And there's been an increase in the insurance cost and a reduction in the available capital, and they're being more selective in the deployment of the capital, especially around those events. So post 27 January and Cyclone Gabriel, they've had major effects on the insurance market. At the moment, we're currently looking about 5 billion New Zealand circa, and these events are damaging to our global reputation. Now, we're taking a contingent of council representatives up to London in the first week of September. We've already booked the rooms in the market meetings so that we can sit down with them and discuss with them about the risks and saying that we are still, and justify why we are still a good market, a good investment, because we're able to supply good quality data with accurate valuations. The local markets, however, have their own treaties on the 30th of June, so we aren't sure how they're going to play out at this time. So what does all this mean? The reinsurance costs are going up. There's going to be a reduction in the capital available. The programs are going to need to be looked at. We have loss limits already on your programs, but the initial estimates were around 10 to 15% on rate and loan. However, that was before the cyclone and the 27th of January event. Conservatively, we are estimating there'll be around 20% on rate alone, and then whatever the inflation provision will be on your valuations. So we need to look at those as well. One of the things we need to be able to provide to the markets when we go and do our submissions are the good news stories about how the assets have withstood the events, the resilience that's been built into the network, and what are the lessons that have been learned about in order to build on this in the future, how you've seen things happen and what you're going to do to make it more resilient. Now, we spoke about claims inflation before, but this graphic was provided by our global markets team, which just shows about the inflation rate and the other pressures that have been mentioned, especially when you've got global supply chain issues, when you have the war in the Ukraine. So that's stopping the product being available coming through the likes of the New Zealand market, as well as China having issues there. So the costs of claims in New Zealand are only second to the United States, and the rest of the world are behind us. But as I said, we've got that high inflation rate anyway at the moment. Now, your general liability and professional indemnity, it has a shrinking market of liability insurers in the local government sector at the moment anyway. We've gone through a number of insurers on the local markets over the past few years. However, Berkshire, who is the lead on this, have been with us for about 4 years now. And they say they're going to be in there for the long haul. Now, that is on your primary layer. Above that, we do have the London markets in play. And when we were talking with them last year, we were able to put across and differentiate you from the other municipality programs throughout the world, and stating that you don't look after the health, you don't look after education or the emergency services, that type of thing, and just what your core part of your business is, as well as taking away that third-party liability for injury, which is in the other countries, whereas here, a majority of those are covered off by ACC. The big thing with this to note is that if there is any circumstances that may give rise to a claim, do not ever admit liability, no matter whether you are in governance or within the council itself. Just take note of what the circumstances are and to advise us. Now, as far as the cyber liability goes, the market has contracted. Unfortunately, this is one of those policies where it's not so much if, but when. There's been a lot of events that have taken place over the years. We've had the local DHB here in Hamilton that was affected last year, and high profile. With that, it's a matter of putting in your there's 7 management protocols, levels of security to put in place. And if you can show that you are doing that, you're doing your risk mitigations, that you are educating your staff and users of your system about how to avoid the likes of phishing attacks and those types of things. If you notice that there's something going wrong with various websites, to notify your IT department. If you can keep on top of that, that's all part of looking after your systems. And unfortunately, at the moment, there's still limited appetite. Local government sector throughout the world has been notorious for being an easy target. And at present, we're estimating about a 30% increase on that, and that has been behind what has been going on with the rest of it. We've been very lucky with the market that we do work with, that the increases have been behind what the commercial market is, that where they've been seeing up to 40%. So 27th of January and Cyclone Gabrielle, another natural catastrophe loss. The 27th of January event was or is currently about $1 billion New Zealand, and then looking forward as to what's going on with the likes of yourselves and Hawke's Bay with Cyclone Gabrielle. It was a major shock to the market, and with that there have been thousands and thousands of motor claims going through. So that has had an impact not only on replacement of vehicles, but you'll notice if you're going anywhere and trying to hire a car, you just can't. It's very, very hard to do so, let alone replacing cars. All the new car stock that had arrived on the yards in Auckland have been impacted. So there's difficulty there. But not just the domestic insurers, commercial property has been affected also. And once again, it's that damaging reputation to the global markets, but we will be putting across good news stories to them. The big thing is to look at your business interruption losses, or how those are being calculated, the alternative accommodation expenses, those types of things within the community. They all are adding up to the claims cost as well. So the aftermath really is rating increases. Initial estimates, we really don't know, but we are being conservative and saying about 20%. When we go through the renewal, which is 1 November, however, we will be starting to send out information to you in the next couple of months, is completing those schedules, which I know you're still going through the big onerous job of trying to find out what assets have been affected and where you're going through, especially as you're in the recovery phase. But focusing on those valuations and that information about your construction, occupation, your protection and your exposures, so that we can provide a good quality submission to get you insurance for next year. So are there any questions on any of that?
Thank you for that, Dee. Folk, it's a very important update for us for a whole bunch of obvious reasons for us. Paulina, we're also taking questions on your paper at this stage. So, folk, I'd wonder if there are questions with the committee at this stage. Yes, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dee. I don't know if the question's for Dee or for Pauline, but I just wanted to know what the likelihood of not finding underwriters is. That's linked to our recommendation in the paper that 1A subject to our insurers finding underwriters. How high is their risk?
So the question in the end might be able to come back into it. It's just basically in our loss study, we've said that we wanted to increase it up to the 1 in 500 event, which was up to $293 million. And so is there, do you anticipate that there would be any issues of finding the underwriters to write it from the 250 that we currently have in our policy up to what the loss assessment is, and that's
Okay, so as much as we say that the capacity from the insurers is shrinking, we are still able to get markets available to you. They will be looking at loss limits at the top end of how far you can buy insurance to. They may be looking at your deductibles and putting the likes of a weather event limits and that type of thing on. So as much as you'll be able to, we still will be able to buy you a program. It just may have some limitations as to what's included and what's not. But we will be working hard to try and get as much as we can for you.
I think, Josh, that raises a very interesting question, because we have a work program with Aon, and we're partway through that, and it strikes me, Pauline, that the third line, which is with the first two steps that we're taking, I'm looking at the 121 on 134, which is the detail of the program, the strategy that we've worked out, how that actually impacts on the risks that we take. Sorry, 121 or 134. It's just the expanded out version of the table that's in the paper. In terms of where we're going. It seems to me step 3 is quite pivotal for us, and not unrelated to your question, Josh, which is actually, so what are the implications for our record, our need to have adequate loss limits, and indeed what Dee is saying in terms of, well, you might be able to go to the market for 293, but actually they might change some of the parameters that are around that. So I think if I could just add on to the end of Josh's question, Pauline and Dee, I might be wrong in overreading step 3, but I take it step 3 will be done prior to us renewing in 1 November this year. Will it influence our strategy going forward, is what I'm asking.
both go backwards and forwards, but we have updated in terms of that valuation. And it's noted in the report that 3 waters have been increased for the insurance revaluations. So that has been done as part of that overall renewal market that each year we will do that as well. So it will be integrated as part of it. But we have done a first step, and we said we've updated the 4 waters valuation, but it will be a continuous step as going on.
I think perhaps what I'm trying to get to is that those are really important, and the remaining 2 steps to me are really important as well, because it gets us right back to the fundamental review of our strategy. And it seems to me that this is incredibly critical for any of us that live here on the East Coast, probably the West Coast as well, if you live with the earthquake risk down there, that actually we integrate this into our thinking, and I'm just wondering how quickly we get that through. Can I just then ask one question, please, Pauline, about our existing processes? I know the paper doesn't quite deal with this, but actually the insurance and what we must be doing now with the existing event. Will we cover that this afternoon?
Some of it will be, but it depends on what kind of details. What we've given in this process, we said what are the identified damaged assets and how we're progressing that, and that there are loss assessors situated saying those. So that process is already in train. We're actually part of the loss assessor has been on site, and Dave has been up and taking those through that. So that part has been completed. Then the next part of that is what are the agreed amounts that we're actually putting as part of that will come back and forward. So I'm not sure if what you're at. No,
that's fine. I think it was just to reflect the importance of what we're doing with insurance. We recognise that we've got adequate resources support into the current. I mean, we've got a current ultimately claims that must be being made against our existing policy, let alone what we're going to set for 1 November in our new policy. And I'm just trying to make certain we've got arrangements in place. I'm asking the obvious question that we've got, there's an obvious answer that we have got appropriate processor in place for activating our insurance for the current year and the claims that come with it.
Yes, but also we would divert resources, because it is a priority to get
Yes.
that in. And so that is in place, and it's a total focus.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, I think this is something that, well, sorry, Andy.
Says that the premium going up is largely driven by the asset values, but surely number of claims and making constant claims is that driving the premium up, or is that hidden somewhere? How does that all work? I'm kind of thinking in a private basis where you get those no claim bonuses and that sort of thing, but this is, how does that all work?
Would you like to answer that one? So as far as the claim, the program for Gisborne District Council is purchased as part of the BOTPAS group. They do take into effect what's happening with all the weather events, and they look at what not only your asset values are, but how you are protecting them, what the condition of them are, which is why they ask for the likes of the construction and the age and those types of things. As much as it's not directly related, they do look at it, but it's more on a whole than on an individual basis because of how it's affecting so many.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I think it seems clear. They look at us as not just Gisborne, but actually New Zealand, let alone Oceania. What are we like? And it comes back to the previous point that I think Dee made. We might get $293 million of cover, but actually they might start changing the conditions, which would be reflective of our past report. Okay, are there any other comments folk would like to make on this this very interesting paper? I even found, believe it or not, perhaps I'm a wannabe engineer. I actually found the stuff around the Hikuringi fault, etc., very interesting as well. But I won't raise questions about that because it only reflect my ignorance. Are there any other questions folk would like to make as far as that's concerned? Yeah, sorry, Rob.
Just one clarification, because I think going forward when we start having these workshops around building resilience into our infrastructure, how does the insurance look at? You mentioned before we've got these assets insured and it's for replacement of that asset. But if some of these assets need to be, we need to build resilience, and if we can put a bridge back to be able to increase it by 6 meters and make it 25 meters longer, how does the insurance look at that? Because is that replacing that bridge, or just to replace a bridge, for example, with like for like, to be taken out in another 10 years in another flood and then have to redo it? Where does that sit?
Okay, so the money that you get back from the insurers is for the value of the asset as it was prior to the event. Anything to increase its value, that is on council.
Yep, that's not a great. That's the answer. It's not a great answer.
I know. I'm sorry. It's not.
So thank you, Dee. Any other questions for Dee or for Pauline at this stage? There being none, I wonder if we can just move to the recommendations then, please, which is that we note the amendment underway around the 293, the move to that, and we note the future updates will come to this committee in relationship to the maximum probable loss for council's infrastructure, which is really reflecting that forward program that we have agreed previously at this committee, including higher risk certainty. And we've got the details there. I think this is something that Pauline will need to keep on a regular quarterly update. I still think we need a bit more knowledge before we hit and understand better how our risks are being managed around the 1 November renewal. We've got a couple of weeks before then, which is good. Look, I'll propose to move from the chair that we adopt these recommendations as sent. Thank you, Josh. Any discussion on the motion? I'll put it then. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dee. Team, appreciate your presence, and we value the work, and you can see that we need more of it as we go into the remainder of the year. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Not a problem. Good luck all.
We need a lot of luck. That's right. That's right. Can we move, I think I see David there, to the health and safety report, please. Item 11.4. Welcome, David, in your hands, sir.
Morena all. I take the report has been read. And I'll give a bit of a summary on what's in the report. So post-cyclone Gabrielle, we're aware elevated risk for our GDC teams, but also for contractors and volunteers as well, including road access, change of terrain, woody debris, all those risks are elevated. So one of the things we've been doing is reviewing more contractor SSPs, site safety plans, to make sure they're effective and not just copies of previous work, with the taking into consideration the elevated risks. And we're doing an increased contractor assurance and verification. We've got additional resources in that area within Dave's team to actually assist with that. Some really good feedback in relation to contractors standing down their teams, because they've been doing a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours, and it's important they actually do get those breaks. So that was encouraging to see that. The second point, staff wellbeing. We've had a slight increase this month. I know it's this month to abuse to staff, which isn't reflected in this report, but it's certainly happening out there. So wellbeing initiatives have been introduced. We had Here For You here, the council supporting teams 2 days ago. We had a mental health 101 session yesterday. We've deployed situational awareness training online for our staff across all public facing staff members. And we've got other initiatives in place to help support the wellbeing of our staff. I think that's in summary.
Thank you, David.
So happy to take any
questions.
questions.
Brief, but to the pertinent points. Members, do we have questions for David or indeed the team here? Yes, Colin.
And it's in the near miss reporting under tier 1 contractors, and the names of the contractors. Were Curry Construction, are they now included in this assessment?
Sorry, all contractors? Do you want to take that one, Dave?
Through each year, carries are on a tier 1. They're lower level down than that. They're not a tier, they're not classified a tier 1 contractor.
I thought after the last meeting, and it was in the minutes, that
I'll follow that up. I wasn't sure about that. We're happy to approach Currys to see if they can give us those figures on a regular basis and include those. Where else do we draw the line? Because there's a lot of other tier 2 contractors that may well need to be included as well. It's a huge task. Probably best if I report on contractors having those accidents and near misses, so that we're aware of which contractors are involved with that. But I'm happy to discuss after.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think you'll find it was in the minutes.
Okay, any other questions? Sorry, if I just wonder if I could ask a couple of questions, please. Firstly, before I move to the motion, Brett, I appreciate the need for us to move on. Can I just check the situation? I was interested in paragraph 24 and the Waikanai Beach cleanup. And I take it Ernst as one of the parties was responsible for the cleanup. Does that become a combined PCBU with us?
It does actually, Bruce, it does. Eastern Wood Council's Aratu and Ernst 1 have initiated a beach cleanup, but have to go through process of resource consent with GDC, which makes us a party in the overlapping duties. They've engaged Site Works to do that work, which is one of our contractors, Shearproof. So we've been working collaboratively with all parties to ensure that's a safe operation for public.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And then the other thing was I was interested in the asbestos issue on paragraph 29 and the sort of the open risk that poses. I mean, look, it obviously poses a lot for the general population, let alone our staff. I'm thinking particularly about our building consent authority staff having to inspect places and what have you. You able to add to what you've said here? Our staff are safe. They are aware of the risk when they go into these sorts of places.
Yes, thanks, Bruce. We actually do quite a lot of asbestos awareness within our teams.
Yes.
We're part of the local asbestos liaison protocols with multiple parties, including WorkSafe, FENS, and Public Health. We do a lot of education with our contractors and with our staff. However, it's not widely known in the public, and as involved in the Edgecombe flood disasters, there was a lot of people doing cleanups initially, unaware of asbestos within the house. So it's important that all businesses have asbestos management plans and that all public are aware of where asbestos can be in their properties.
Yeah, between, I think you said the line I was in the letter. Oh, wait a sec. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, look, the critical thing is clearly around our staff. I'm not certain who's responsible for the broader publication. That's not us, is it? No. Okay. Brilliant.
No, but just through the chair, I'm aware that there has been quite a national campaign relating to emergency events and asbestos, and that's on the back of the learnings from Christchurch earthquake. So there has been quite a lot of public comms, particularly the people who are doing strip outs on homes, to be mindful of contaminated materials and other hazardous materials, and particularly how they're tracking into landfill environments.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Otherwise, I've got Red moving. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Josh. I'll put the motion in. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, David. I know we might feel a bit quick. There's lots of good information in that report, but I think it's wise to make that move. So we're up to the move to go into public excluded business, and that's on page 134, the last page of our open agenda. We have two matters, and the proposal is that we move into PX for the reasons that are outlined on that page. I'll move from the chair that we move to public excluded. Thank you, Riet. Is there any debate on that motion? Do I have a break? To read. Oh, because you haven't seen it. Oh, sorry. Okay, right. Oh, well, look, I propose, Read, if we actually have a break at this stage once we've passed the motion, and give folk a chance. Sorry, I hadn't realised. I've been privileged to have had a chance. Oh, okay. Oh, right. I didn't realise that. So, look, is there any concerns or debate about the motion to exclude the pub for those? There isn't. Okay, I'll put the motion in, please. All those. Oh, I have a second. I don't know. Was that you?